Meanwhile, while other people are connecting, I want to say hi to everyone who is connected and welcome you to our monthly webinar. As part of the BRT team, I want to thank you for participating in our activities and especially to Cristian for sharing this webinar. And to begin, I will introduce Cristian and then we will listen to him within about 45 minutes. And finally, we'll have a session of question and answers. Nevertheless, you can write on the chat whenever you want, so Cristian can read your questions while he has ended. So, just to start, I want to tell you that Cristian, he's a civil engineer with mention in transport of University of Chile. And in addition, he did a master in science in urban studies and planning at the MIT. He was employed in the public sector as chief of operation in the operative unit of control of traffic here in Chile. And he also has developed as an advisory engineer in the Department of Transport and Telecommunications here in Chile. Nowadays, he is employed as a consultant at the Inter-American Bank of Development. So he is going to talk about testing collaborative accessibility-based engagement tools within a case in Santiago. So now I'm gonna disconnect my camera and my microphone so we can hear Cristian.
Hello everyone. Thanks for the introduction. As Thomas mentioned during the presentation, I'm right now working at the Inter-American Development Bank. But the last year I finished my master thesis in urban planning and studies at MIT. I was working with in this research related to a tool called COAX, that is an engagement tool, and we are going to. I will present the application of this tool in Santiago. First, I would like to thank, because this thesis was part of the greater research, and I wanted to thank my advisor, Chris Seagrass, and a team of people who were working from the MIT, Shin, Anson, Ricardo, Peter, Kelly, Aisha, and also thanks to Juan Carlos Muñoz, who was also a supporter of this project, and some of his students, Ignacio Tignado, Tomás Cox, and Jaime, I forget the last name of Jaime, but it's fine. He knows that I'm very happy to work with him. Well, let's go to the presentation itself. I will talk. Jaime Sosa, yes. Sorry. Okay. Let me go for the first slide. Well, the agenda of this webinar is going to start with an introduction of what is COAX, or this engagement tool that I will talk about, and what is the accessibility formulation of this specific tool, and what formulation are we using. I will next go to the research question and objectives of this research. I will do a little literature review of the different subjects that we were studying related to the research. Then I will go to experiment design and tool development. I will show you the results and some conclusions and further research. I'm guessing that I will take something that 35 minutes in doing this, and this is a good thing because we will have more time for questions and discussions. Okay, what is COAX? The main subject of this research. COAX is an MIT collaborative accessibility-based stakeholder engagement tool. It's focused on accessibility or potential connectivity to opportunities. It's an open source, open database, web-based online platform, and display the performance of public transportation systems. The idea of this tool is to encourage the engagement of the community and stakeholders groups in transport planning process. The main idea here is how we can use technology or a visualization tool to encourage the public participation in transportation planning. This is kind of the main idea. If you can see in this picture, this is, I think, an interesting example. We can see how the engagement process or the public participation process is happening in transportation in general. You can see some people working in some maps, some people that are showing some results in a very static way. You have other kind of resources. You mainly work sometimes with post-its, and you give your ideas, and there is some people who are listening to you and people who are talking about the different aspects of the projects. If you can see in these both cases, technology is something that is missed. And the idea of COAX is change this perspective to go to something more technical, something like this. We wanted to have a process which is using the technology that we have, not only for calculating results and in the part of the project development. We wanted to use the technology for the public participation. Well, how COAX looks like. This is an early version, but I just wanted to use it, this screen to show you little details about the tool. You can see here in this screen that you have a map that is the main focus of the COAX, showing results in the map. You have this little flag here that shows you where is your location. This is the main idea, showing a specific location or maybe your house, your household. And these little these areas here in different colors shows you your accessibility or isochrones. How you can, how many places or you can reach in some certain amount of time. That means this is the definition of an isochron. And here you can see, for example, from this specific point, using public transport, you can reach this whole area of orange, for example, with a certain project. If you change that project, or if you add a feature to this project, specific projects, you can get a different area, for example, the blue area. That means that you increase the area that you can reach in some specific amount of time. In this example, for example, you can see here, well, maybe you cannot see it very well, but the idea here is in 45 minutes with a base scenario, for example, the orange one, you will reach some amount of, for example, in this case, jobs. And if you are adding a transfer feature that can be, for example, an increase of frequency in the services of a VRT system, for example, you are able to change your isochron to reach more places, and this means that you increase your reachable jobs. That's the main idea. COAX is based on OpenStreetMap. It's mainly developed in the case for pedestrians, because you always need pedestrians to go, for example, when you are using transit to get from your household to the next bus stop, and also for transit. It used GTFS, the Global Transit Feed Specification, and it's also used some geographic information like layers of location of jobs, or you can use another ones like health centers or education, etc. COAX uses a simple accessibility formulation. You don't need to use a demand modeling traditional approach. You don't need to have like a matrix or whatever. You use potential transit supply between and the relation of this supply with some spatial information. The formulation of accessibility is a three-dimension accessibility in coax. We use the concept of connectivity, mobility, and access related to places, transport flows, and individuals as an access. And this is the formulation. I will not go really into the formulation. I think it's not really important right now, for sure. If you can later on, if you are interested in this, you can ask me a question, and I will give you all the references of the formulation. But as an example of this formulation, if you are in a specific place here, this location, for example, a household, and you have different job locations as a G here, for example, and you have a cutoff time frame of 30 minutes, for example, in this case, this means that from this origin you can reach all this area, okay? And if you are using the cutoff function of 30 minutes, if you are using a period of time that is AM peak, and you decide that the opportunity layer is jobs, and you are using transit, you can see that your accessibility will be 10 jobs that are all the points that are inside of this area. This is kind of the easiest way to see this formulation of accessibility. With this little introduction of what is coax and how coax calculate accessibility, I will go directly to the research that we did. What are the research questions and objectives? The research questions were two. The first one was, how could accessibility-based visualization tools like coax in this case specifically be used to improve current engagement process and advance to a more effective transportation planning? And the second one is, could ABBT tools encourage wider metropolitan, rated and local discussions in transportation planning engagement process? These are the two questions that we wanted to achieve with this research. What are the specific objectives of this research? First, explain transport planning engagement process and their particularities in the context of Santiago, build a web coax toolkit, and design a simulated transit planning engagement for testing the tool in Santiago. Develop a simulated participatory experience. Was very important because during the research we were not able to participate in a participation process that is happening in Chile. We decided to build a participation process specifically for testing the tool. That means that we are not having a real participatory project, but we are doing like a simulated participatory experience for the purpose of testing the tool. Analyze and evaluate the results of this simulated testing experience, and develop some recommendation for new coax testing and experience and further research. Well, I will not go very deep into the literature review. For sure, you can download my thesis and read it more carefully, but here in the engagement process, I will try to point out three important things. First, transportation planning have this history of poor public participation. And there is some traditional approaches of public participation that means that are related with, these two approaches are related with predict and provide, and decide, announce, and defend as an approaches. And these kind of approaches that are still happening during these days, they are making an increased gap between the transportation decision making and the transportation social aspect of the decisions. I think it sounds a little bit complicated, but for sure, if you read the paper about this, it's going to be more easy. But as I said, I don't want to go very deep in this literature review. Traditional approaches, as I said, are very solution-oriented and use mainly technical language. And for sure, this means that these are not developed for a non-expert audience. And that means that when you are doing a public participation setting, you increase the gap in that sense, because you are not using, for example, the technical language. You are using the technical language. And what are the consequences of these traditional approaches? Public mistrust, NIMBY, that means not in my backyard, as maybe you know something about these results, lack of project buy-in, and lack of collaboration across scales. What is the situation in Santiago is an example of an institutional competition and lack of integration across the scales. As you may know, if you're familiar with the case of Chile planning in general, it's a government really centralized, and it's it's part of the traditional approaches, how you develop the projects and how you make the public participation. What about data visualization in this case? Well, as we were researching about this, in general, transportation planning has not leveraged the visualization technology for using this technology in the participatory process. Mostly is focused on the planner side, right, or in the engineering side. We are using the technology tools not for the participation process, but for mostly for the developing of the different projects, right? Okay. Next important point of the literature review, it was this idea of metropolitanism. If the use of this tool, COAX, could be better for understand the metropolitanism idea of the planning of the transport planning. I think here the most important part is that maybe we know that for transportation planning, a metropolitan planning could be better because many things. For example, it can gives you a better coordination for transportation policy, where you are using a bigger or a wider of a wider. I mean, when you are seeing the problem in a wider way than when you are just seeing for example from the municipality side. It's as we know, it's better to see the problem as a whole, but of course this is a challenge for public participation because the problem is bigger. You have more areas for the participation, right? The places, the city, the metropolitan area is bigger, and this is a challenge for the public engagement process in general. But what is the opportunity here is the use of the visualization tools. We think that maybe if we use the technology, the public engagement at the metropolitan scale could be better. These are mainly the two ideas that we research in the literature review. The metropolitanism and as I said, the engagement process in transportation planning. But let's go to the experiment design and tool development that we did for developing this research. First, talking about the experiment design, as I said a few minutes ago, the objective was to recreate a real participatory experience in the Chilean context, right? And we designed a workshop with some specific characteristics. These characteristics were that we developed a workshop with two testing groups. One group that we call decision makers, and a second group called stakeholders. In our decision makers group, were composed by officials from the government and municipalities, people who take decisions about the projects, the transportation projects. And the stakeholders were mainly people who are part of some advocacy groups that are related with transportation. Each workshop uh, the idea of the workshop were to have at least 6 and a maximum of 12 participants. We are having for each group, each workshop with each group, 3 facilitators, and the idea of the facilitators were to give the participants all the knowledge that they need to test the tool, and the idea of the facilitators was also to have like different backgrounds of the facilitators. Because we think that these conversations related to transportation planning are very broad, and we don't want it to have only like a facilitators who knows about demand forecasting, for example. And we decide to have like one facilitator from the perspective of street design, one facilitator who was expert in demand forecasting, and one facilitator who knows more into the idea of the urban development. We also have 4 workshop staff for different activities that we need to develop during the workshop, for data collection, for technical support, and for room setup and general coordination, for example. And during the workshop, we use a visualization device that was the most the most important part of the workshop was using the technology, and the visualization device was 75 inches touchscreen. We decide on some ideas of the setup of the room for the workshop. You can see some pictures here about how many square feet you will need for food area, for tool testing area, for reception area, and finally we decide that we need a place between 600 square feet and 800 square feet. And this table shows the different activities that the staff is doing at the same time in the workshop. What were the workshop main activities? The preparation and introduction. In the preparation and introduction, we define some materials that we need to use during the workshop. There is a special thing called COHES that is a document that is mandatory from MIT for testing or doing experiments with humans, and we need to give this questionnaire to all the participants. And we also did introduction of the tool and a pre-survey. The idea of the pre-survey for sure was to have the initial perceptions from the people, to then have a post-survey, and then to analyze what was the change that the people perceive using the tool and not using the tool, right? The second part was the basic use and coax capabilities. We wanted to show the people before they start to test the tool what are the capabilities of the tool, and what you can do with the tool. Here we didn't want it to show from the beginning the tool from Santiago. That's why we use Coax Atlanta to show how the tool works. Basically, because we didn't want it to bias the people and show some project that maybe they are interested, and then when they start to try the tool, they will know before start to using some of the results of the tool. That's why we use a tool from another city. The third activity was the coax testing, where the people were able to use the tool and using a base scenario, and then use a base scenario project comparison. And at the end, we were doing a coax evaluation. That means that we finally provide a post survey about the experience to understand the experience of the use of the tool, and we finally make a discussion with them about the experience of using the tool. At the same time, we were having a data collection, as I said at the beginning. This data collection was mainly from from two different origins. The first data collection was, as I said, the pre and post surveys. But at the same time, when the experience or when the workshop was happening, we were also collecting the tool interactions of the people and the conversation and recording the conversations of the people when they were testing the tool, in order to understand better what are the results of using the tool. Then we did tool experiment design. Then we did the tool development. The tool development, I should say, that was the most job demanding part of the research, because it would start from the latest version of coax, but replicate the case of Santiago, and replicate the case of Santiago need a lot of effort to create the tool and everything, and it was, as I said, the most important part of the job. We use a tool feature selection and a new development, as I said, based on something that we call standalone version of coax. That means that it's a version that is supposed to help the people to understand better how it works. It was a development that we did after the first version that I show you in the presentation at the beginning. We choose to use the accessibility version because there is another version of coax that shows you not the isochrones, it shows you travel time and origin destination travel times. And we also choose the fixed project multi-selection. That is a case that it was similar to the coax Atlanta. That means that in this case you are not having the possibility to change the characteristics of the different transportation system. For example, coax can give you the opportunity to change, for example, the frequencies of a BRT system or of a bus system. Here we have a fixed project that you can choose or not. For example, a new line of metro, but we are not able to change the characteristic of this new metro. And as a new opportunities that was very important for the project, we decided to use the traditional thing that was using in the previous version of coax, jobs, but we also add education by ranking. That in this case we use a score of schools that the Ministry of Education was developing, and also in the case we add health centers, public health centers in this case by type. And we divide the health centers by primary care, secondary care, and tertiary care, where primary care is just when it's a place where you receive like primary care, and tertiary care is an hospital with the whole different specialties of the different specialties. Here you can see this map on the left shows you the different projects that we were developing for the different scenarios. We choose the line 3 and line 6 of the subway and the suburban railway of Nos Alameda as a scenario in 2018. That was our short-term scenario. And also we add all the new Transantiago bus services that were included based on this new development of the subway. In the midterm, we decide to include the Teleférico Bicentenario, that is a project here, and also the Tranvía Las Condes, that is another interesting project here. And as a long-term scenario, we decide to include at this point was really recently presented the line 7 of the subway in Santiago. with all of this, we create the tool that is mainly as I show it here in this picture. As you can see, the tool itself looks different at the beginning. It was a new development that we did with the team here for this special case. And you have the map, but you have all the results now in the right side, not in the left side. And you have a legend of the different projects here. And you have, as you can see, the base scenario and the new scenario. And here are the different projects that you can select or not. For example, in this case, you can see that the base scenario is the blue line or the blue area, and the new scenario is selected the 2008, the short term that includes the new subway and the two new subway lines, and also the suburban railway. And as you can see, the increase of the accessibility is happening here. And you can see also the increase in the jobs, and this is the same picture, and you can see the jobs, the education increase, and the health centers increase in accessibility. Well, with the tool ready, we set up the different workshops, and I will tell you more about the results of the workshops. In general, all the participants were really enthusiastic. I think that the testing environment was fine, was good enough for the testing experience. We were not having any technical difficulties that, as you can imagine, when you were developing the tool and everything, this kind of things can happen at some point, but hopefully nothing happened. We were having an adequate room and setup, and we didn't have any inconvenience for the testing workshops. Finally, we have six people from the decision-making group, and 9 people from the stakeholder group participants. One important result here is that of course the decision makers group have a big desertion here, right? Like the officials and people from the government, they said that they will show up, but at the end, not all of them show up, and it was part of. It was good enough because we have 6 that it was our minimum amount of people for the test, but at the same time, it's something to take into account for next workshops or something. In general, all the surveys, we have a high level of response, only a few empty answers from some people, but in general, the people answered the questions that we did in the surveys. The survey results are divided in 4 points: project impact results, project learning results, project and accessibility measure for achieving goals, and general workshop experience and tool evaluation. And we have some quantitative results about the tool interactions of the people, of the participants in the workshop. I will show you some of the most important results, and then I will go to the conclusions, and you will see that main conclusions are from these specific results. Here in these graphs, you can see in this side the pre-survey, and here the post-survey, and we wanted to show it in this way because you can see what was the change between before and after. That means without using the tool and then using the tool from the different groups. And this question was very important, was related to the project impact results. We wanted to know if the people, after using the tool, think or thought that the tool was important to see different results that from the beginning, right? For example, you can see that all the slopes of these results are positive in general. That means that the people are changing in a positive way after using the tool. And for example, the question here was, how do you think the transportation project presented with the tool will impact the different groups that are showing here? For example, yourself, your neighborhood, your commune, Santiago metropolitan area, people walking, people biking, people driving, and people riding public transport. And for the group of decision makers, in every group, the change was positive. That means that after using the tool, they think that the impact was higher than they expect from the beginning. And this chart this chart here also shows you that this positive change. In general, it was 65% of people that changed positively after using the tool, and just a little bit of people have a negative change. And same as in the case of stakeholders, as you can see, the slopes are positive, but not that positive, not really positive compared with the case of the decision makers. That means that in general, stakeholders were more neutral about the use of the tool. But if you can see here in this graph, the change between negative and positive change was bigger than the 50%, and this can give us an important take that is more than the 50% of the participants change their behavior after using the tool. That is something that we wanted to achieve with the tool. Okay, I think I said everything of this related to results. This is another question that it was also important, that is regarding the project learning results. We asked the question here, to what extent do you disagree or agree with the following statements? And the statement where I learned a great deal about the projects after using the tool. I can describe the projects to a friend or colleague after using the tool. I can describe the impacts of the projects to a friend or colleague, and I have the knowledge to debate confidently about this project. And you can see here the difference between before and after using the tool, right? And you can see again a very positive slope. That means that in each case, participants thought that the use of the tool can give you an important project learning. Same with these charts down here. In general, the neutral was 33%, for example, here in the stakeholders, but mostly of the participants in the stakeholders group thought that it was a positive change after using the tool. Okay. What about the project's accessibility for achieving goals? We have a pre and post serving comparison, and in general here, this question, the tool was not behaving very well with these questions, but because if you can see here, it's mainly or a neutral, or maybe in some cases the slope was negative. That means that from the beginning people were thinking that, for example, projects, the use of the tool for project advancing in other goals such as education, health, and environment was lower than they expect in some way. But here the tricky part is they start with a very high situation. They believe at the beginning that the projects are going to be very, very important in advancing, for example, for other goals, etc. And this is, I just wanted to mention that this is maybe because of there was a failure on when we created the survey, that the people, because they believe at the beginning that there was very high, they cannot change into a more positive way, right? Because they already put 5, for example, or 4. And in this sense, we believe that this question was in a way bad framed. And For example, some points here, the 62% of the decision makers and the 56% of the stakeholders cannot go up for the results, because they already said that the projects for achieving goals and accessibility for achieving goals are very high. I hope the explanation was good enough. Well, what were the survey main results? The general workshop experience, that it was in the 2.5 post-survey question. The results were very positive responses among the two different groups. Participants largely agree about the open discussion and other interests, diverse opinions, and support on groups' recommendation that mean trust. Let me explain a little bit more in this. When you were working in a group, the answer of the survey, the participants tell us that they will support the results if the group agree to give a specific result. That means that it seems like the tool provides some trust between the participants in the group. That is something very important for the public engagement and the public participation. We did also a tool evaluation about the usability and the usefulness of the tool. And in general, we received very positive responses about the usability and the usefulness of the tool from both groups. Participants agree that COACs provide a useful environment for collaborative work. Participants agree that COACs will support the kind of conversation that the public needs to have about transportation projects or transportation planning in general. Friendly for training, bringing confidence, help to understand how travel is for others, etc. That's some of the results that we have from the survey. What about the tool interactions? Here is some. We are not talking about the surveys. We're talking about how the people behave with the tool itself. As we mentioned before, the tool participants, we have 6 decision makers and 9 stakeholders. The total COACs interactions in the decision makers group were 37 and 99 for the stakeholders. That means the stakeholders largely interact more with the tool. Even in the case that the total potential interaction time that either group have was lower for the stakeholder and higher for the decision makers. Interaction per participants, as you can see, we have 11 from the stakeholders and 6 for the 6.17 for the decision maker groups. And interaction per minute, you can see that we have, of course, more for the stakeholders. That is something very interesting. What kind of interaction we saw between groups? Here is a definition of the different interaction that you can use with the tool. Point is just, click into the map to show something. Move the marker means that you are changing your location for the accessibility calculation. And click, tap, or zoom means other gestures that you are using, like doing sum, change some of the parameters of the result, etc. As you can see, in general, the stakeholders were doing more interactions, but at the same time, they were doing more difficult interactions, right? Like they were doing different things in a more wider way. And well, where are these different interactions happening in the tool? Mainly in the map, because you can also move the things in the control panel as you can change the travel time for the calculation of the isochrones and everything. But in general, both groups were more into work in the map rather than in the control panel. Well, what were the conclusions about this work? Well, the experiment results confirm the utility of COACs for project impact understanding and project learning, contribution to a good workshop experience, provide a useful environment for collaborative work, support the kinds of conversation that the public needs to have about transport. As we discussed with the people, some of them were saying very interesting thing. In this case, one of the participants told us that all these positive results triggered by the use of coax promise potentially to improve the public engagement process, advancing through a more effective transportation planning. That's part of one of the things that the participants tell us. The second part of the conclusion regarding the metropolitanism, the experiment showed that this version of coax is more likely to change the perception in high scales. Remember when I showed you the project impact between the different groups? In general, the change was more positive in the cases of larger and high scales, for example, metro areas, rather than, for example, municipalities or neighborhoods. That is something that we wanted to check in this case. And the comments during the debrief activity also corroborate this idea. In general, the people told us that this tool was not able to show like what are the impacts of the projects in a very little scale, like neighborhood, but it really shows in a wider way. And this is a good thing they told us, because they can understand what are the impacts for others, and not only for their neighborhood or the places where they live. What are the future research that we thought that it could be interesting after doing this project? We think that for going further in the idea of metropolitanism, we need to develop a new kind of tool for coax that is not only showing accessibility from specific points, but this new feature could allow to see in a more broader way the accessibility from the perspective not only for a specific point of the city, but from the perspective of a whole neighborhood or the whole region. What is the accessibility not only from this specific place? What is the accessibility of this whole communa in the metropolitan region? That's something that can give us more ideas or more understanding of what is happening in the metropolitan scale. Well, we think that it's very important to expand the experience for more confident results. As I said, this was like a first step, and we were using like experiment of a participatory process. I think we should move forward to use the tool in a real experiment, in a real participatory process, to really understand if the use of this tool is valuable. We really think that in the Chilean context application we can do that, and it's something that we need to try to do in the next research. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.